Hello once again to a brand new episode of r/MaliciousCompliance. My name's Ryan, the official host here on Reddit Voice, and I look forward to bringing you guys today's top stories. Before I do, I'd really appreciate it, however, if you could hit that subscribe button, as well as make sure you got notifications turned on, that way you could stay up to date with all the latest and the greatest we have here on the channel. Demoted. Then they realized they effed up. I will try to summarize this as much as possible through context first. I worked 9 years at a well-known company worldwide provider of various products. Won't name the company, but it was a division of this company that I worked for. I started at this company at the bottom as a tech, did my job well and excelled upwards. After 6 years, I was promoted into the national support group and then also excelled at this position. It was well paid and salary, which was a nice bump in pay, not to mention the hours were great. After a year in the new position, I was promoted to a co-operator position, which I shared with another. We were very good friends and we got along very well. To this day, we still do lunches and chat quite frequently. Now, I was trained up on the in-house software that runs the dispatching of techs, which was made by an in-house software developer, which the software used codes for areas and states. Very complex, but for him it worked. Although there was no documentation whatsoever. No manual, nothing. The guy that had the position before me was leaving the company for a better offer, so he took a month to train me on the software, and of course I wrote down all the codes for all the areas just so I didn't get anything wrong since there was no manual or instructions. He then leaves the company. A year later, the developer of this software dies from cancer, so now no one but myself knows how to use the software. Taking vacations were few and far between due to this issue. I constantly asked for a backup to be trained so they can do this job while I go on vacations, and at this point I could only take 2 days at a time for a vacation, and my wedding was coming up in 8 months, and we were taking a month-long honeymoon. My request was denied every single time I requested a replacement to be trained. When my co-operator and I took over the new department, it was in shambles. The turnover rate for repairs was sitting at around 8 days, which upset a lot of customers due to these machines being used constantly during work hours. We brainstormed and came up with solutions to fix this and reduce downtimes dramatically. The bad thing about this is that it put extreme pressure on logistics to get parts overnight and have the techs in the field. Logistics manager was okay with this, and he in turn hired enough guys to take the burden on, and it was working out pretty well. This turned out to be great. We reduced our downtime from 8 days on average to 2 days. Customers commented constantly about how much better our services were and how they were definitely happy with how repairs were going. Then it started to go south from there. My manager was looking to move up the ladder and needed to hire someone for his position. Of course, me and my co-operator apply for the position since we know how to run the division and think we could do the job great. We both get overlooked for manager's friend, which he had no experience in the division whatsoever. He was actually the one of the logistics purchasers. He had no idea whatsoever on how to run any technical experiences whatsoever. He of course gets the position, and right off the bat the stupid idiot wants to change how we do things and reduce the strain of the logistics group. Co-operator and myself immediately protest and depose his changes with prejudice and vigor. Through this, it fell on deaf ears. When he tells us to implement the changes, I refuse, and so does my co-operator. For weeks, we argue with manager's friend, which is now my manager. He gets upset and continuously fights with us to make the changes. We again refuse, and I emailed his manager and explained the situation, pointing out that it would increase repairs on our customers, and they would be very unhappy. At this time, we grew the base of our customers 20-fold, and our satisfaction rating on all our reviews were in the upper 90s. Though these emails and everything that co-operator and I were explaining went on deaf ears. At this point, manager's friend feels that I'm the instigator of the disobedience, and that week I was called into a conference room with HR, manager's friend, and his manager. They informed me I was going to be demoted from operator to dispatcher, due to my inability to be a team player and confrontational to my manager, etc., etc. I tell him it's fine by me. It meant less work and the same pay, so I'm okay with this. Now with this job, you had certain functions of the job that you could and could not do. You could only do what was assigned to you for that job description. Dispatchers could only dispatch calls to techs and not assign their own calls. That was my previous job. My co-operator at the time was in charge of escalations and onboarding techs did not know the system I used to dispatch these calls. The next day, I come and sit at my desk, waiting for calls to be put on my board, knowing that there was no one now to dispatch calls to the dispatchers. After about 4 hours, I get approached by manager's friend asking why I was not dispatching calls to everyone. I politely said, "Remember I got demoted? I can't dispatch. It's not part of my job description, and I don't want to be fired for doing something I'm not allowed to do." The dread on his face could be seen as it streaks up his back and hits him in full force. At this point, he realized he fucked up. Of course, his manager and HR didn't know anything about this software, that it was developed in-house, and had no instructions on how to use it. It was the backbone of this division's dispatching software. Without this, no calls could be dispatched whatsoever. This news is now getting around that no calls are being dispatched, and manager's friend's manager now enters and asks what's going on. He soon realizes as well what happened. They then call me back into the conference room and ask me to train a replacement. Of course, I refuse. The day ends and I go home. Next morning, I show up for work on the dot and they call me back in again, offering my position back and to please start dispatching calls as soon as possible. Of course, I refuse the promotion, pointing out key points that they brought up during my demotion meeting on why they were demoting me. And because of those points, I felt I had to overcome them in order to be able to accept the promotion. It would be a great time to focus on my abilities that they outlined. They were flabbergasted and frustrated clearly. They get upset and tell me that I'm holding the company hostage and that they'll have to take me to court. At this point, per my contract, I'm now entitled to a lawyer and they have to pay. Few days go by, of course no calls being dispatched, and they're now relying on emails and phone calls to get calls dispatched, and parts ordered with the pandemonium abound. It's adding so much more time to each call and ordering parts that the whole system's falling apart. I finally get contacted by a lawyer telling me that he is to represent me and that he's being paid by the company I work for and that he works for me, period. He can't talk to them without my knowledge. He can't do anything against my own interest and that he is being paid by them but works for me. He goes on to tell me they can't force me to take a promotion and they can't fire me if I fulfill my obligations of the employment contract, which was pretty easy. Basically just show up on time, take breaks at specified times, and leave at a specified time. So I do. This goes on for a month when they're finally getting to the breaking point. Repairs are exceeding 2 weeks and customers are canceling their repair contracts due to service issues. They decided to demote me again to logistics. Now, the manager of logistics is a good friend, and he thinks this is retaliation for all of the issues. So he just says to me to take a desk over in the corner and do my thing. Whatever I wanted. He's not going to punish me for their stupidity. We go to court, they present their case, and my lawyer presents mine. After 2 days, the judge rules in favor of me and says that a company cannot force me into a job or doing a job that I do not wish to do. This would be considered enslavement. They press the judge to have me turn over the information to run the software that runs their division. The judge asked me if I had written it down. At this point, I didn't have it. I threw it away, so I answered honestly to the judge. Though I did say, I do remember how to use it and all of the codes to dispatch. Since I did it for years, it became like second nature. Judge then asked me if I'd be willing to write down the instructions. I politely said no, and judge said, "Okay, that's that then." Upon coming back to work the next day, I decided to start looking for another job. After about a month, I found a new position at another company making about 10% more and with better options. They also agreed to give me the month off with my salary for my honeymoon. So I wrote up a resignation letter and sent it to my manager, his manager, and the senior staff of the division. Also, the CEO of the company, explaining everything that went on and why I was leaving the company. I then wished him the best. That Friday, I packed up my personal stuff and left. 2 weeks later, I get a call from the CEO of the company apologizing for what happened and that all of this information just came to light, that the individuals involved were terminated, manager's friend and his manager and the one above him, which was sweet to my ears, and he offered my job back. However, I politely declined. A few weeks after manager's friend was fired, I was told by my good friend and co-operator that he died from a drug overdose, which is sad and completely not deserved, no matter how much I hated him. The division I ran was merged into another division a year later after it was not able to recover. 30% of the people that worked for that division were laid off or transferred to other divisions. My co-operator is still working for the same company, though he said after this whole ordeal, it never recovered and never was the same. It's gone downhill dramatically, and he'll be retiring this year. TLDR, running divisions dispatching, being the only one that knows the software with no replacement or manuals, manager demotes me because I won't do things his way that'll negatively affect our customers. We go to court, I win, manager later ODs after being fired. Won't listen to my warnings. You're the boss. So this was years and years ago, back when I was working as a land surveyor. Basically, what we would do is go out with a laser gun and a tripod and shoot it at a bunch of mirrors on a stick because math. That would basically give us an extremely precise map of an area. My dad was the one who trained me in the trade, and because I have a very analytical mind and this is basically geometry, the job I had a talent for. Though honestly, I wasn't all that fond of the job. Good at it, just not fond. So one day, with my dad's help, I get put on a survey team with a guy we'll be calling Jay. He was technically the crew chief, which meant he was technically in charge. Jay was a dyed-in-the-wool redneck. He listened to conservative radio, thus forcing me to do the same, drove a beat-up old pickup truck, lived in an apartment complex that somehow had a rusted-out car sitting in its front lawn, and had a stubborn streak Texas tall fueled by his utter surety that he knew better than every damn person ever. I have never heard him say anything to confirm it, but if I had seen a Confederate flag on his truck, it wouldn't have been out of place. Jay didn't like me, and I loathed him. We would often meet up at 6 a.m. or even earlier to get equipment loaded and set out on a job. I'm not a morning person. I'm definitely a night owl. And while I'm always awake, alert, and on the ball while on site, the car ride out to the site would often lull me to sleep. Jay hated that. Every time I would, fighting to keep my eyes open while ignoring the constant drone of Southern fried conservatism flowing out the radio, start to doze off slightly, Jay started screaming his damn head off, telling me to wake the F up. If he had to be awake, I sure as hell was gonna be awake too. 10 minutes later of him ranting and he'd finally shut up, only to start over again when my head drooped an hour later. This is an example of Jay's attitude toward pretty much everything. He was right, I was wrong. Suggest differently, and he'd hee and haw until you gave up. So on to the malicious compliance of the story. We're out on a massive job. We had to survey an entire strip mall complex. One of those deals that takes up an entire block to itself with lots of little alcoves and corners that made slight lines difficult. Lots of setting up, shooting a few points, setting a traverse point, then breaking it all down again to move to the next point. We knew already we were going to be at it all damn day, so we broke everything out and just got to work. As the crew chief, one of Jay's responsibilities was that he would plan our traverses. He would choose the vantage point if he thought we could get the most relevant data recorded from it, set the traverse, let me shoot it in, and then we would switch positions. I'd set up the instrument and data collector on the traverse. He'd get a backlight from our old setup location, so the instrument could orient itself and knew what direction it was facing, and then he would go around with the prism and I would take the readings. About halfway through this massive job, I've just broken down the instrument, and I'm heading to my next traverse when Jay stops me.
Hey, you forgot to shoot in the archway.
I should point this out for non-surveyors. You may have noticed that as crew chief and prism man, Jay is the one who picks what to shoot in. So when he says,
You forgot.
what he means is,
I forgot, but I want to shift the blame onto you anyway. Go back to the last point. We need to shoot that in.
so off I go, back where I had just come from. I set up the instrument and get on the walkies. Hey Jay, I'm dialed in, just need a backsight.
You were just there. You don't need a backsight. Just shoot it in.
I can't shoot it in without a backsight. If I don't get the orientation, the rest of the job could be pivoted. Jay has all the swagger, but I doubt he understood 3 whole words of what I had just said. He was crew chief on seniority, not an actual mind for the math. Basically, since I had broken it down, the instrument didn't know which direction it was facing, so it would pick a direction at random and just assume it was facing that way. Which means any points we shot in, including all traverses we shot from that point forward, would be pivoted around that point, a random and arbitrary angle.
You fucking shoot what I fucking tell you to fucking shoot. Now take the shots.
So I shrugged. Technically, he was in charge. He was the only one who literally called the shots, and he was the only one responsible. So I took the shots, and we carried on, with me knowing everything was being increasingly transposed as we carried on. Cue to the end of our day. We had finished up pretty early compared to when we thought we would be getting out. The way we did things is we would shoot the points, then upload them to our company's server through a desktop with a mobile modem. This was exclusively my job because Jay was a monkey. He wouldn't know a file repository server mapped to a network drive from his asshole. So we pack up all the equipment, get in the truck, and I start uploading our points file. Jay likes to take off from the job site immediately, even though he's supposed to wait for word from our techs confirming they got the points. But by a stroke of luck, he decided today he wanted to relax with a cigarette before we left. Usually he'd smoke as we drove, but I guess he just wanted to chill. In any case, we're actually on the job site, not on the road, when he gets the call from home office. Jay answers the phone, expecting permission to fuck off for the day.
Hello? What points? I don't understand. What's wrong with them?
My ears perk. I know exactly what's wrong with the points. Through straining my hearing and knowing roughly what the tech's about to say, I can barely make out the following. Mutter, 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 mutter. Control points. Mutter, 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 mutter. Over 400 yards. Now one might be wondering what control points are. Well, dear reader, I shall now edify 3 with an explanation. You see, when surveying a large area, standard best practice is to do it in a large loop. You tell the data collector that point 001 is at position 1000, 1000, 0, and then collect the other points in relation to that arbitrary point. When you circle around the area being surveyed, you collect the position of that same first point again as your last shot, so the techs know roughly what kind of error margin drifted in while you were traversing. And needless to say, when you're dealing with measurements with precision down to 1,000th of an inch, an error margin of 400 yards is completely unacceptable. Now, what I could have done is ask Jay to let me talk to the tech, inform them that Jay refused to take a backside at one of the points, and tell them to take all points from above point XXX, pivot them around point YYY by Z degrees, all numbers that I had memorized, and that would have lined up the control points, compensated for the error completely, and we would have driven home having done a good job, but I couldn't do that, could I? This would have indicated Jay was wrong, and Jay was never wrong. So I held my tongue and tried not to smirk. Jay refuses to believe our points are wrong.
OP must have uploaded them wrong. Reckon, idiot. Do it again and do it right this time.
Of course it's my fault. It was always my fault in Jay's opinion. So I uploaded the points again, and the tech informed him that the points are still off. Jay seizes the laptop. 20 minutes of the bastard stabbing at the keyboard ensues, with him having to get the very patient tech to guide him step by step through the incredibly simple process of dragging and dropping the points files into his a-hole, and again, the tech informs him that the points are wrong. He is incensed. Minutes later, we're piling out of the truck and grabbing all of the equipment again so we can set back up on the point Jay effed up on, with a backsight this time, go figure, and reshoot every single point in the back half of the job we just completed. I didn't mind. I was being paid to watch Jay curse and fume and bitch me out, with us both knowing I was the one who had warned him about the issue. Of course, he keeps blaming me for the F-up, but I just take that as an occupational bonus. In the end, Jay got bawled out by the big boss for wasting company time and money. My dad told me his check got docked for that screw-up. Me, I got overtime. After all, Jay's the one responsible for the accuracy of the data. I was just the idiot pushing buttons on the instrument. TLDR, don't ignore your crewmates when they know how to do your job better than you. And there you have it, folks. The end of the epic. If you like these stories, be sure to leave a like on the video, as well as subscribe with notifications turned on so you could stay up to date with all future videos. As always, my name's Ryan, the official host here on Reddit Voice, and I look forward to seeing you guys in tomorrow's video.